Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I tried to be on time. Something happened on the way on trying to be on time. But good morning to everybody. Welcome back to what I hope is your favorite show. It is the old-fashioned sports show. And I don't like that y'all put that my logo may look like something different. I don't like that y'all put that in my head. But good morning, welcome back. Man, I got a bunch of things to discuss with you guys today. So sit back and relax and enjoy the ride. We got some good stuff. I got some information I want to be able to share with you. Just it's a couple little nuggets as relates to the coaching search, the search to replace Blake Gideon. We could get into that one today. Also, got a guest coming up, probably around 8, 9, 15-ish or so our time. So if you're watching this on replay, it'll be probably 15 minutes into the show. I've got Eric Edholm from NFL.com, who not only is one of their senior writers, but also does some draft things, and he's really high on the draft as well. So I'm going to really get into some draft topics. So we're going to talk Super Bowl. We'll talk Super Bowl halftime, and then we'll talk about Quinn Ewers and maybe some of the other guys from Texas that he likes, and just kind of go into those topics, man. So we should have a good, fun sports show today, and chock full of stuff. So please, before you forget, hit the like button to me. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. That just gives you all kinds of good notifications and stuff as we kind of get this party started today. So happy Wednesday to you. Happy hump day to y'all. And happy Valentine's Day to all of y'all. And even if you ain't got a Valentine, you got yourself. So go ahead and be sweet and special to yourself, because you know what? No one's going to love you like you. So let's get started with the conversation of where Texas stands as relates to the search to replace Blake Gideon. Over the weekend, or I guess it was kind of Monday morning, it all runs together at this point. I was able to kind of check in with some folks and kind of get what I viewed to be one of the top 3 names that would be there to potentially replace Blake Gideon. And those candidates are Notre Dame coach Mike Mickens, Pitt assistant head coach / for secondaries Corey Sanders, and Rutgers cornerback coach Mike Orfeh. And so those kind of end up being what it looks like the top 3. And of course, there's some questions. Some people had some questions about it, and it's kind of like, there was, I put out a list of candidates last week, right? And I believe some of these guys were on the list. I think Orfeh was the newest addition to this list on the report that I had on Monday, right? And so, so as we kind of go down now it kind of gets dwindled down to like, these are the guys, right? And so these are probably the top 3 guys, which is, by the way, all of them quality candidates. Like, as I've kind of kicked the tires and asked about, what in the hell? Who are the candidates? For Rodney Terry's replacement. Ugh. My God, I watched that game last night. That we'll get into that. We'll get into that, Chris Bennett. But there's clearly going to have to be some sort of shakeup there. And it's just so funny. It was like, it was all good. It seemed like it was just all good just a week ago, and now RT, I'm like, hey man, you're making it hard for people to ride with you, RT, when you get your ass hit like that at home. But by the way, Alabama was throwing everything in there. Alabama was throwing, I'm talking about like the way Alabama was shooting. I mean, they acted like that goal was like the ocean. Them dudes hit everything. That was some shooting machines. But then it kind of showed you like some of the lack of shooters that Texas has. I don't know. We'll get into that. We got plenty of time. Anyway, so as relates to the subject of, Blake getting this, so they narrowed it down to like, these 3 guys. So where we are right now is I was told, kind of checked in on some things yesterday, and the thing that was communicated to me is that the process for those who are behind the scenes, it seems like the interviewing process is going well. It looks like Sark is interviewing guys kind of covertly, if I can say that. Like I feel like there's some covert interviews, and I don't mean like covert Ford or Hutto or anything like that, or Jeep. Even though I bought a Jeep from Covert, and still waiting for my spare keys, guys. I just want to throw that out there. Mm. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out there. Just a little, just a little. All right, guys, I'll mess with. Don't keep messing with me. It looks like that he's conducting these interviews. If I had to piece it together, so this is Anwar's. Um, this is Anwar's kind of putting the pieces together and kind of disseminating like the information, right? My belief is that these guys are kind of flying in under the radar during their interviews, and then they'll and going out. So I don't, I feel like some have already happened. And what's kind of communicated to me is that it looks like probably, if all goes well, by the end of the week, by no later than this weekend, Texas will have a new safeties coach to be in the fold. Now, what's my caveat? Like, okay, I don't know, why are you just not jumping all the way in on this one the same way that Alabama jumped on Texas's ass last night in the men's basketball game? It's because here's the thing that's tricky with these assistant coaches, right? Is that once their name gets out there, automatically that program, especially if they really like them, and if Texas is going after you, you probably really liked at the program that you're at. Like, Texas really doesn't pick up everyone's leftovers, right? They're pretty good about that. What happens is that the program often will make a counter offer to keep a guy in the fold, to make sure that a guy stays, right? And so what I don't know is, and often, by the way, just the mere mention of an interview gives you a pay bump. Just the mere mention, like, guys want to get interviewed. Like, they literally want to get interviewed, because if they can get interviewed, they know they're going to get paid one way or another. It's either going to be by the school they're with or the new school that they're going to, right? So the one thing I don't know is, and the thing is, I think this is where everyone's being a little bit careful about these things, is that if they put out, hey, who the leading candidate is, then it gives you an opportunity, the other school, to be the one that kind of swoops in, and it's like, oh, okay, you're the leading candidate. Here we go. I give you a good example. Blake Gideon, just a little while ago, a week and change ago. Seems like forever, right? But when Blake Gideon goes to interview at Georgia Tech, nobody behind the scenes really knew where Blake stood as relates to where he was on the pecking order. And you didn't hear from a Georgia Tech perspective either, right? All you really knew is that Blake Gideon got the job, right? Now, what's interesting is that Blake Gideon actually got a raise after the season, but the thing is that they were able to give them, that Georgia Tech was able to give him, that was too late for Texas. Like, they were able to give him that DC title, right? So now if you're Texas, and it kind of gets out there like, this is my favorite, my number one guy, right? Now all of a sudden, all these guys get to go back and say, all right, can you add this amount of money with this particular title, right? So right now, it's you probably won't know much more than what we're at this moment. The interview process is going well. These are viewed as three really, really strong candidates. I have my guess who might be the number one person, but these are three really strong candidates that they're looking at, with the hopes that all goes well and they're done pretty soon. Now, just kind of a breakdown so you guys would kind of know what we're dealing with, right? Catch, when I had something last week on Thursday about some of these guys, Catch and a couple of guys, I asked Catch, like, hey, just give me like kind of a recap and then, some stuff about each guy, so to kind of go along with the breaking news story. I'm like, I'll break the news, you just give me an analysis, okay? Here's how he describes Mike Mickens. He describes us, Mickens is viewed as a rising star in the coaching industry. One source called him a defensive version of Tashard Choice. He's someone that I can easily see being a head coach, the source said. He's probably one job away from the big job. He might need one more job, and maybe he needs to do it away from Marcus Freeman. All he knows is that area. He's a Midwest guy. And there was a couple other things. But what's interesting is I checked in with some people asked about Mickens over the weekend, in fact. And I was told that really good coach, very good developer of talent. I guess there was an opening there at Notre Dame that he was hopeful and optimistic that he was supposed to get and wanted to get, rather, not supposed to get, wanted to get. It didn't happen for him at Notre Dame. So, of course, he's okay with looking around and looking at other particular places. So I heard great things about Mickens and, if he comes in here. And look, I know he's a Midwest guy, but you got to know when as relates to Sark. Sark brought in, Chris Jackson, who really wasn't known as a recruiter because he was an NFL guy. And then he brings in Kenny Baker, who was an NFL guy, and they still have success. So I wouldn't get too wrapped up in that one. By the way, Barb's 10 comes in with his super chat. Barb's 10 is smart. He's got like $100. And he's like, I'm going to spread this 100 out throughout like a couple of shows, all throughout the months. I like it. He said the Bama game reminded me of when my JV basketball team scrimmaged the varsity squad. We literally got dunked on and had to run suicides as punishment. Yeah. That was definitely JV versus the varsity. That was hell. It might have been the freshman team versus the varsity. I mean, it was bad. The only difference is, Barbs, y'all got dunked on, and Alabama just was shooting like Steph Curry just went ahead and gave them some magic potion because them guys were shooting like absolute lights out. It was a clinic that them boys put on here in Austin. It was bad. I was like, oh Lord, RT. Whew. I'm like, man, you have to do something in this tournament. But boy, you were absolutely 100% right. Okay, so then there was the subject of Corey Sanders. By the way, that's what, if you see the super chats, 100% are able to get me get me going. Ben G says good morning, and good morning to you. Eric's in the background. So let me wrap this up with Corey Sanders. Corey Sanders is from Pitt. Kind of viewed as a big wild card of the four names that we've been mentioning. And then, of course, there's Orfeh, again, who's at Rutgers as well. Well, I'll get more into Sanders. I'll get more into Orfeh. I'll double back around. Let me do this. Let me set this up. I don't like a lot of people. Now, I like people. Well, I don't really like a lot of people. There's people like, I'm like, I love this guy. Like, we had a chance to work together at Yahoo, and it was only a year. And maybe I'm just romanticizing it in my head. Maybe it was just absolute hell. Maybe I'm just blocking all the Al Toby emails that I got. But I absolutely loved working with this guy. He was great. He's going on to do fantastic things. But we just finished wrapping up. We started doing the NFL and there's so many topics I wanted to kind of discuss. So I asked him if he could come on this morning, and he was really cool. His boy Eric Edholm his boy Frank Schwab blew me off. So Eric Eric decided to come in here. Let me bring in my dude, one of my good friends, Eric Edholm from NFL.com. Good morning to you, sir.
I always cleaning up Frank's messes around here, like
Still.
always having to follow that dude and figure out what he did. No, I'm kidding. We had it may have been slightly romanticized, but I definitely enjoyed working with you, my friend.
It was really good, man. It's good to see you. You look good. You look healthy and everything. I hope you are. Eric, I want to ask you a Super Bowl question.
Sure.
Kind of off topic for a second. I want to talk about the biggest topic that everyone's talking about, which is the halftime show, Eric. And what's fast, I want to ask you, because it's an interesting thing where, you would hear some of the people who might be a little bit older, right?
Yep.
Complaining about the show, what they didn't like. But Eric, you've seen the numbers that have come out. It's been the most watched out of all the shows, surpassing Michael Jackson. The streams, especially on YouTube, surpassed what Usher did in 11 months. He was able to do it within one day. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, from a success perspective and everything, like just your overall thoughts on that actual whole thing.
Just on the kind of the reaction to Kendrick Lamar and everything
the reaction and then the success that is actually had when there's been so many outspoken voices that said they didn't like it, but the numbers show something totally opposite.
Yeah, right. First of all, I mean, I was a little bit shocked that, you know, the buzz leading up to the Super Bowl, just big picture, right? Like people were, they're sick of the Chiefs and, you know, the Eagles, you know, there didn't seem to be a lot of buzz. Like it seemed like it was hate watching if there was watching, but the numbers for the game were incredible. And then to your point, you know, the attention seemingly paid to the halftime show was immense as well. So there was a lot, you know, whatever fake boycotting was going on was happening in very small numbers, right? So look, I'll be totally frank. I had to walk the dog and it overlapped with a big portion of his performance. So I caught about the last 5 minutes. My son loved it. He's 9. So he's not part of that older set. My wife, interestingly enough, she's way more into hip hop rap than I am. I like it to a degree, but I don't have, you know, I'm not a Kendrick Lamar fan per se. She didn't love it. She thought it was, she's like, I had a hard time understanding what he was saying. Like he was rapping so fast. And that sounds like old people talking, right? But it was just like, you know, so again, I don't really know his music, but I was kind of surprised by the reaction too. It was like, everybody either loved it or hated it. And then they had to explain exactly why they loved or hated it. And then the further explanation was, well, you don't understand my perspective. So it's sort of a snapshot of America, I think, in a lot of ways. Where you discuss anything these days, you're going to get something similar. So I can't add a whole lot of perspective, but it was interesting.
So tell me, do you love Jalen Hurts after this Super Bowl? When you think about what he's been through in college, right? For a guy that ends up getting benched at Alabama, has to go to Oklahoma, gets drafted by Philadelphia, and to end up being the Super Bowl MVP and having a performance that he has. Just give me your thoughts on Jalen Hurts, because obviously he's a Texas guy, so there's always been interest in him.
Sure. And a quick note, sorry, Ben G, your chat guy here, who said Tone Loc would have been better. As somebody who actually loves Tone Loc, and we did one of his shows in college. I was in the college music committee. We produced his show. He played for 25 minutes and then got off stage and expected to be paid full amount. I'm just saying, like, he let us down that day. This is like 1997. I still hold a grudge against Tone Loc for that.
To be fair, he only had 2 hits, so I'm not quite
Funky
sure.
Cole Medina and yeah, exactly. Like it didn't. I think he redid each one twice. It felt like, but yeah, no. The Jalen Hurts story to me is fantastic, and I love the guys who have a little bit of a different style and aren't sort of the same sort of cookie cutter type players. And you know, when he was coming out, obviously the question about whether he'd be a running back, you know, that was actually a thing, like Lamar Jackson being a wide receiver, right? But we're obviously now in an era where players are now, it's not what can't you do, but what can you do? And we'll try to, you know, fit our offense around that. I think that's a win for fans, quarterbacks, teams, the whole bit, right? It's a higher success rate. There's more chance that these talents are going to be developed and everything. But just looking back through, like, getting benched at halftime of the national championship game in college, waiting a year as a little used backup, you know, having to go to Oklahoma to reinvent himself, you know, being a second round pick who was questioned, right? I mean, even just all that before you get to Doug Peterson kind of throwing him under the bus. And then, you know, last year, the stress with him and Sirianni was palpable. You could tell those guys weren't necessarily on the same page, but to their credit, I don't think, you know, they're going to go get beers after the game, but I think they made it work. Like, they were pros about it. You know, people question whether I thought it was a legacy game for Nick Sirianni, for Jalen Hurts and others, and Vic Fangio, their defensive coordinator. Like, this adds that feather in their cap that they didn't have before. And look, however you want to spin it, Jalen outplayed Patrick Mahomes in that game by a clear margin, even with the interception. I loved how he threw the pick and then immediately realized, like, they're going to come with the blitz again. I need to have a better answer than just kind of hucking it up off my back foot. And he did. He scrambled a few times, and it was just it was a full kind of circle moment for him, maturing as a quarterback and as a leader. The whole thing. It's a neat story, and I'm really happy that he got to the mountaintop.
And what about Saquon? I mean, here's the guy that, I mean, the story seems like it's about to go south in New York, and it's just like, all right, well, you're thinking maybe it's just is going to be just another retread. He's going to maybe he's just going to flame out at some point, and he just lights the world on fire. I mean, talk about what he was able to do, going from almost on death's door at New York to basically revitalizing his career in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, and watching the clips of Giants owner John Mara in that Giants draft, kind of the draft version of Hard Knocks that they did, saying, they're looking at him during the final few days before free agency starts, saying, like, this guy goes to Philadelphia, I am not going to sleep well. Well, I don't think John Mara's had a good night of sleep, since since last March, because Saquon's been on a heater. Really, everything he's touched has turned to gold, and everything the Eagles touched has been great too. Zach Bond, a guy who did nothing for the Saints for 4 years, all of a sudden becomes an All-Pro. I know we have to give Howie Roseman his flowers for all the decisions he makes, but also the coaching staff for understanding how best to utilize these guys. With Saquon, obviously, like, staying healthy was a huge thing, but also having someone to just take the heat off him. Like the Chiefs clearly decided, we are not letting Saquon Barkley destroy us in this game. And he still almost got 100 yards from scrimmage. Like, it took 30 touches, but still. And that opened up A.J. Brown. That opened up Devontae Smith. That opened up Jalen Hurts' running. And, very few teams, I think there were like 3 or 4 teams that say that could reasonably say they did a good job on Barkley this year. And just big picture, I don't know if I fully realized how good the Eagles were this year, because we had the Chiefs with that big record, the Vikings, all these other teams, the Lions. Like, since September, they lost 0 games with Jalen Hurts starting and finishing. That's pretty good. They were 2-2, struggling a little. And then ever since then, when he's been able to start and finish a game, they've been excellent. And they won a couple, without him too. So just, I don't think we fully appreciated how dominant they were after the first month of the season.
Even though it was on the losing side, from a kind of a Texas Longhorn perspective, Xavier Worthy, when it's all said and done, Xavier really caught fire towards the end of the season, really becomes a key component of their offense. And he kind of avoids that kind of John Ross kind of disease where you just go for being super fast in the combine and not doing anything really much in the NFL. Your thoughts on what Xavier was able to do his rookie season?
Yeah, I heard some Chiefs fans kind of early in the season lamenting that he was sort of a trick play specialist, or like, not necessarily a full-time guy. But like, to your point, by the end of the season, that was obliterated. That concept, that narrative was shot down, because like, he wasn't the volume guy that Kelsey was. And but it was clear that, not just obviously in the Super Bowl, where he played well in spite of his team getting blown out, but several big plays in the AFC Championship game against the Bills almost burned them the first time they played up in Buffalo too. So, even week 1 against the Ravens, like, I think he touched the ball 4 times and had 2 touchdowns. It was averaged about 20 something yards a touch. So he was doing pretty well for himself right away, but you saw them continually expanding his role and adding, to what he does. And, with DeAndre Hopkins possibly heading off into retirement, with Rashee Rice coming off a season-ending injury, with Travis Kelce mulling retirement as well. Like, this dude's gonna have to be Stephon Diggs all of a sudden. They're gonna give him the ball a lot more than they did, and he was pretty darn good in year 1. So you're right. I think that the separating himself from the sprinters of the world, like the John Rosses, that's a great example. That he did that pretty quickly, and that's darn impressive as a rookie on a championship level team.
SEC Matt asked a question. He wants to know if there's any hope for the Cowboys. And I'm just curious, like, in addition to that, should Cowboys fans sell their stock and just become Texans fans for the future? Like, what do you think about the direction of both of those franchises?
You said the Texans and the Cowboys?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I think obviously a year ago, the Texans, we were kind of ready to put them. They were almost like where the Commanders are now, like the up and coming team with the bright star quarterback, and the path to a Super Bowl is so much clearer than it was before, and all that. And I think that's definitely still true, but I think until the end of the year, we didn't necessarily see the best of CJ Stroud. We didn't see the next sort of level performance from the defense. It was good, but it wasn't great. And they still have a lot to figure out. But I'll always take the team with the young, energetic head coach and the young quarterback who appears to be relatively close to a star level in CJ Stroud over a team. And again, this is not disparaging Dak Prescott. He's in a way one of my all-time favorite players, because I had a much higher grade on him that he ended up getting drafted. So I was like, all right, Dak proved me right. He's great. But the number of things facing Brian Schottenheimer right now, which is, adding weapons, securing, securing, what's the word? Bolstering that offensive line, probably adding, at least two guys on defense who are contributing. But how do you do that for a team that won't spend, and Jerry is acting like, okay, all we needed to do was swap Mike and Brian, and here we go, back to 12-win season. So, if internally they believe that strongly about themselves, that's great, but I got to see it. Last year was obviously, even with Dak getting hurt, it was hard to feel like this was a team, a couple wins away from a Super Bowl or something like that.
Last NFL question, and I want to ask you a draft or some drafts questions, and we'll ask you a little bit about Quinn Ewers. Bijan Robinson, is he a bona fide star in your point of view?
I love Bijan. He's one of my favorite backs to study, and just sort of seeing him, the combination of finesse and power and all that. And there was definitely some frustrating moments year one, but I didn't get discouraged about him. I didn't see that, oh boy, this is not working. This wasn't other backs who've been drafted high and have disappointed. I think, you asked the Falcons, just like you asked the Lions about Jahmyr Gibbs. They're both really thrilled. So yeah, I would say he's in that upper tier. And I think it helps the case for a guy like Ashton Genty, honestly, from Boise State. Falcons took Robinson at 8. They were chided for it, just like Gibbs going 12, got everybody all hot and bothered. But, look what Barkley did this year. Look what Josh Jacobs did. Look what Derrick Henry did. I'm not saying we're all of a sudden back in the 80s and 90s where there's an Emmitt Smith and those kind of backs every year, but the run game is kind of cycling back into the NFL. The numbers back it up. So, I think he's a star, and I think they've kind of proven that he's so far been relatively close to that value.
So let's look forward to go to the draft, right? I believe in your last mock, you had Cam Ward going as the first quarterback off the board, with Shedeur Sanders going as the second quarterback off the board.
Yep.
And that makes sense. My question is Quinn Ewers a guy, from your evaluation and the people you talk to, is he the third quarterback? Is he a first round pick? Or is he a guy that you need to see more of in the combine and some other things to kind of put your finger on? I'm just kind of curious from your evaluation standpoint. I know 1 and 2, but where does Quinn fall after that?
Yeah, and I think I would say it's probably the same 1 and 2 for most teams. I haven't talked to anybody that had another quarterback in that range. At least not recently. It may have been over the summer or something to that degree. But I think Quinn's in that group, that next group where it's a little bit murky right now. Will Howard from Ohio State coming off a championship run, Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, who has, I would argue, some similar kind of qualities to Quinn. Maybe he's a little thicker, a little more well built for NFL. Tyler Shuck from Louisville. He's taken the long road. Texas Tech, Oregon before that. He's 26. So there's, some teams are just going to be like, nah, like the Browns aren't drafting him, right? I mean, the teams who have the analytic departments that say don't draft anybody over this age and all that stuff. I doubt that, that he's going to be on their plates, but he's somebody that a lot of people are sneaky interested in. Jalen Milroe from Alabama, obviously traitsy player, but super inconsistent and just somebody that you don't really know exactly what he is. So, and I would say Ewers belongs in that group too. I mean, the fact that he reportedly turned down such a big NIL offer. Now, maybe he was just done with college football and wanted to preserve his Longhorns legacy or whatever. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, this is it. This is the final chapter. I made my mind up. That could be it. But the fact that he turned down such a big reported number, like, makes me think maybe his camp knows something that I don't necessarily know at this point. Yeah. I mean, I've not got anybody I haven't had a lot of conversations about him specifically, but a couple guys in the fall. And I was like, is Ewers somebody that can make a push for the first? And I think it was right after that first Georgia game. And the sentiment was kind of like, no, not yet, So I'll know more in the next couple weeks as we start heading into Indianapolis for the combine. But
yeah,
he has that. I mean, I'll just say, I don't think any of those guys I listed have like taken the bull by the horn and are the front runners for QB3 at this point by a huge measure. So there's an opportunity there.
Do you think that the best situation for a guy like him is going to a place where he doesn't have to play right away and just being in a good, solid franchise, kind of just sit there for another couple of years and then kind of go, as opposed to, obviously you go top of the draft, you're going to a bad team, and that project that takes time.
Don't go to the Jets. You mean don't go to the Raiders? Yeah, like
yes, yeah.
Honestly, yeah. Like if he went somewhere like the Rams with Stafford, being sort of on the the cusp of retirement, maybe, or Seattle, where you could see them moving on from Geno Smith at some point. I'm there are other examples, of course, too, but like that kind of a situation. In fact, if there's a guy I probably compare him a little bit to, it's Sam Howell, who's with the Seahawks now. I mean, I think there are some similarities. I don't know that they're clones of each other, but point being, Sam was a guy who I would say coming into the draft, some people thought had a shot at being a top 50 pick. He ended up being the first selection of the fifth round. Now that was a weird draft, but it kind of feels similar in some ways that like there was Kenny Pickett. Nobody was really that excited about him. And then there was that second tier. This year's second tier kind of feels similar to that group of, Matt what's his name? I can't even think of his name now, Matt Corral from Ole Miss. And, the other guys in that draft that were all kind of third round, Desmond Ridder and Malik Willis and such. So, maybe it ends up being that kind of thing where somebody of that group that I listed earlier, whether it's Ewers or Milroe or whoever, Tyler Shuck, ends up slipping to like the fifth round and maybe outplays it, but maybe doesn't.
Two more, man, and I'll let you get out of here. Kelvin Banks, Matthew Golden. You have those guys in your mock as first round picks. From what you've heard about and seen on film, what do you like about Banks? And Matthew Golden's the kind of a guy that, comes out a little bit out of nowhere, playing in Houston and then coming to Texas, playing under Sark. And now, people talking about him maybe being the, one of the top receivers in the draft.
Yeah. And I'll go in reverse order just because, like, had you asked me in November, where's Matthew Golden going in the draft? I probably would have said late second, early third. I don't know. I mean, somewhere in day two, but then all of a sudden by Mobile, I had a conversation in the airport. We were talking about a few of the wide receivers, and it's kind of a underwhelming class. Like if you stack this wide receiver class up against the last 4 or 5, this is one of the weaker ones, no doubt. We've had a golden era. See what I did there at the position, but Yeah, I did not expect him, kind of a smaller frame, obviously, but if he runs well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the touchdown production was super high. The game to game production seemed to increase over time, and by the playoffs, obviously, he was, as trusted as anybody. And I don't know how much Gunnar Helm helped himself down at the Senior Bowl, but I mean, guys like Golden probably helped themselves by not going, in the sense that they let their play and during the season speak for itself. And yeah, top 40 or 50 pick for sure, maybe a late first rounder. Banks, I feel like, kind of like we were talking about with the quarterbacks, like everybody's sort of waiting for one of these guys to push forward a little bit. Now the injury was kind of left things a little incomplete or whatever. I would say people got super hyped about him a couple years ago, and he took care of Will Anderson. That was like a big moment for him and sort of thrust him into the draft spotlight, the national spotlight. I don't know that he's quite played to that expectation level, but you're talking about a pretty well-built guy, pretty coordinated athlete. Like, I like the way he moves, has his, sort of lower half and upper half in concert. I think looks comfortable moving in space, looks comfortable pass protecting. I don't think he's a bulldozer, but I think he's a good blocker. I would say probably more mid to late first round than the top 10 guys somewhere bandying about. But again, I think he'll do pretty well for himself. And maybe he slips out of round one, but I don't think it's very far if he does. I would say top 40 for pretty darn certain, I think, at this point.
Last one I'll ask you, it's kind of a combo question, is, Texas also had Jahdae Barron.
Yeah.
The quarterback, was one of the best in the nation. Any evaluation on him? And also from a big picture perspective, Eric, there was a time where, look, if you felt like if you got a guy from Alabama, you got a guaranteed player. Georgia was like that for a while. It kind of still is, right? But last year, Texas has a ton of guys drafted. They've got a ton more in here. Is Texas kind of entering that era where this is a place where you say, all right, this is where you want to go get talent? Because you and I've covered drafts where Texas players haven't been drafted before. It doesn't seem like Sark has it going that way. So your thoughts on Jahdae and maybe what you're seeing from a kind of talent development standpoint here at Texas?
Yeah, I mean, like, for instance, last year when Jordan Whittington got drafted in round 6, it was a good indicator that, like, there's a different level of talent pool that they're, like you said, there really hadn't been before. And I think Sark's obviously a huge reason for that with his recruiting and everything. And you saw Whittington obviously, come in and make some plays for the Rams this year. I mean, again, I'm just sort of using him as an example of, like, their third receiver would not have been drafted a couple of years before, right? And so that kind of just gives you a little snapshot of how they're doing. And yeah, so the difference is immense. Jahdae was, he's one of those players that it's easy to fall in love with when you watch him, because he man covers well. He's got great feel in zones. He's just you could tell he's a film study guy, the way he reacts to plays. I mean, there's just a lot to get excited about. Size-wise, average. The question is whether he could play outside or whether you prefer him as kind of a, nickel or a hybrid back there. To me, that's still a starter in this NFL. Like, you're still playing those guys 80+% of the time anyway. You could give him snaps at safety and not get killed there, I think, if he needed to. And I like Makuba too. I think he showed out in some of those late season games. And but Jahdae kind of reminds me in a certain way of, like, Brian Branch. You talked about, like, people go to Alabama to, they shop on busy streets. Like, that was a player who somehow slipped to the mid-second round, and his tape was clear first round tape. He just didn't have those immense measurables and that elite athleticism. To me, like, everybody's kicking themselves for not drafting that guy a couple years ago. I almost wonder if Barron isn't in the same kind of case where maybe he's not a first round pick, but maybe he goes in the first dozen or so picks around 2. And he could be. I mean, again, we're so far from that right now, but I really like him. I think he's a smart, instinctive football player, which you can never have enough of, in my opinion.
And you like the Texas players going forward as far as the talent standpoint is concerned?
You're asking, do I? Oh yeah, man. I'm excited. Obviously Arch is the big name, you can't get away from that one. He'll be a fascinating guy to talk about in a couple years, but yeah,
All right, the very last thing.
yeah,
I expect Arch to be here for 2 years, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
but that's just hypothetical. There's no GM that's going to go to an owner if Arch decided to come out next year and say we don't draft this guy because of X. Like no GM is turning down that kind. No owner's turning down that kind of money making material that Arch would be, right? I mean, whenever Arch does come out, he is the number one overall pick in the draft, correct?
I mean, like there was a real debate a generation ago between Ryan Leaf and Peyton Manning. I know Manning has built up the name even more since then, but you never know. But I absolutely see what you say. Evaluators will come in and give these guys just football grades and say, here's what he is, here's what he's not, blah, 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 blah. Owners, coaches have a different perspective. And then owners come in and say, haha, I see marketing opportunities, right? And so,
Mhm.
if there was a team that had conviction on Arch and said, like, I don't think he's the best quarterback in this draft, and the owner says, well, I think he is, wouldn't
Yes.
that be a fascinating situation? I mean, that's how people get fired. That's how jobs get
Yes.
lost. But I do like the player. I mean, I'm not there
Yeah.
yet on him as an NFL prospect, but that's how these conversations, and sometimes happen. You have
Mhm.
owners who say, this is the guy, obviously Johnny Manziel would be one in Cleveland.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that does happen, no doubt.
Yeah, well, there. Just always remember when you do your evaluations and talk about Arch, people always they always talk about Peyton and Eli. They always forget his dad is Cooper.
Coop,
So when we were to talk about the athleticism, it has to start with Cooper Manning as opposed to the other guys. That's
the
where the
former
athletic.
wide receiver, the guy who was robbed of an NFL career, right? Yes. I'd give him
Exactly.
his proper his birthright there. Yeah.
All right, Eric, get out of here. It was good to see you. Eric Edholm from NFL.com. You go read all his good stuff. You can follow him on Twitter/X. It's Eric_Edholm.com. Used to work with him at Yahoo. We worked together there and had some great times when we both covered the NFL. Now he's working at NFL.com, and I am here and enjoying myself and enjoying the good life. So if you miss any part of that interview, make sure you go and check it out. Eric's one of the good guys that I thought you did. And by the way, now that we're in the off season, quite honest with you, now it's going to be kind of the time that I'm going to try to lean on a lot of the people that I know to bring them in for some interviews and hopefully some good informative stuff that you and I can kind of discuss and conversate about. And I think I may have just made up a word conversate. So just a quick reset. What I was told is, as relates to trying to find the replacement for Blake Gideon, the three candidates that I mentioned earlier this week: Mike Mickens, Corey Sanders, Mark Orfei. I feel like Sark is going through this process. I've been told that it's been going well. To my belief is that there are interviews that are happening that no one's broadcasting at this moment. But from what I've been told and what I've been led to believe is that if all goes well, they will be able to have a replacement by the end of the week. Then now again, there's a lot of things that have to happen. There's negotiations, there's proposals, there's counter proposals, there's all kinds of things that go into this. But at the end of the day, I hear it's going in a really good direction. Everyone's really excited about the candidates that are there. Mickens is viewed as a future, DC kind of a head coach thing. Sanders, I had one person tell me. Let's say what this person told me as relates to Corey Sanders. Let me go through this. I'm going through my DMs. Hey, someone told me, here we go. Surprised he isn't a head coach. Pitt promoted him last year to assistant head coach. Strong recruiter, will eventually be a head coach. I had one source tell me that. And then Orfei is a person with some Houston ties from being from there. And he's a person that I think you got to keep an eye on because of Texas and from a recruiting perspective and what they would like to accomplish in that Houston area. So there's that. Couple different things, and I'll make sure I'll get these guys here. NFL good insiders are good to have here. Thank you. I appreciate that, Benji. We're a well-rounded audience, right? So we can discuss many things. I won't make it into that. And I'm not going to bring in a guy who covers the Cleveland Browns, right? But maybe I'll bring in someone who covers the Cowboys or something to that effect, and we can have those kind of conversations. Thank you, David, who says that was a great interview. And then Benji, one more time, who will get it? Your gut feel, Anwar. And by the way, Barbs, that he is a good dude. I enjoyed working with him. He was just a really nice person, just a really good. There's some people you just like, man, that's a good dude, like, or a good woman, right? You're just like that. That's how he always was, just really cool like that, and good to talk to. So I really love Eric. My gut feel, if I had my gut on it, my gut says Orfe. That's my gut. That's my gut. That's where I'm leaning towards. You know why? I feel like a couple of things. I've always said, like, the obvious hires is never probably going to be the hire for a guy like Sarkisian, because Chris Jackson was not the obvious hire. Kenny Baker was not the obvious hire, right? But nonetheless, he goes out and gets those guys. They really are wanting to have guys, I feel like with this hire that, look, they know they can teach guys how to recruit, but a guy who has the connections in Houston is definitely kind of helpful. And when you say connections in Houston, like, what does that mean, right? It means, like, because I think sometimes as reporters, we're talking these like real general terms. We don't really break it down. It's kind of like, you ever meet somebody from, let's say you're out of town, right? Or you move to a different city. Then you ever meet somebody who, like, was from your area, and then y'all start talking about specific things about the area, and you gotta have like this instant bond where you're like, oh man, did you ever go to this spot? Or did you ever do something in here, right? And blah blah blah. So it's not as simplistic as, oh, he knows the coaches, right? It's being able to almost kind of talk the lingo and talk the dialect and have that connection, like you're from the Midwest, and like, oh man, we did these things, and we had these festivals and all these kind of, what I'm saying? It's like, so that's where I think it becomes a strength, I think, for a guy for like an Orfe. I don't think Rutgers is probably paying him a ton of money. And so at that point, that's where, if I had to just gut lean, that's the guy that I think it's kind of out of the blue. Like, Rutgers, like, what just happened? And I've asked people, I'm like, you know who this guy is? And like, I don't really know that much about him. So I'm like, Sark has done his due diligence. Sark has really, really done his due diligence on this guy. So that's just my gut. But now, that being said, like, this is what I told y'all. It's like, all these people are going to go back to their schools and programs, and and if their schools and programs want them, they're going to throw some cash on them. To look at what happened to Tashard Choice in interviewing with the Cowboys, right? We want you. We're going to give you $800,000 not to leave. It's like, I'm good. I get it, right? So he's like, so we don't know what that process is, and so that's why it's just like, it's leans and it might be feels, but when it's all said and done, we don't know what's going to happen in the negotiation process, right? But once we get past the negotiation process, I think we'll have an answer by this end of this weekend, and we'll go from there. And another thing I got to keep an eye on, I've also heard, and I'm not necessarily always from a Texas staff, but by making calls on like all these coaches, right? It's just something to just put a pin in it. We'll come back to at another point. But here, for a lot of people, their buyouts, a lot of these coaches, a lot of their buyouts are going to get reduced at some point in March. And so someone said, hey, just get ready that you may see movement in college football as people's buyouts get a little bit lower and lower down effective of March, like the different contracts. So again, I'm going to get you some more information on that. Just put a pin in that, and we'll come back to it. And we'll circle around to it. Okay. I think there's a recruiting show coming up next. So I think I need to get the hell out of here. I'm pretty sure I'm over my time, way over my time, but it makes sense for sometimes I do a little bit of a shorter show. This one's a little bit longer. I actually could probably do another 20 minutes, but I do need to get out of here. So listen, y'all, Go out there, have a fantastic day. I know it's raining, I know it's ugly, but go out there, be safe on those roads first and foremost. Be safe on those roads and go out there, do something special for yourself. You know what I always say? I say it for a reason. Live each day like it's your last, because one day it will be. There's a lot of people waking up this morning that, this is going to be it for them. So live the day. Seize it, enjoy it, do something special for yourself, do something awesome because you deserve it. Love yourself. And I will see y'all tomorrow. Y'all take care. Peace out. And one day I'm going to get my outro music going. This is some BS.